everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. No, I'm not the chair. I'm the superintendent. But because we just had an election and picked up 2 new members, we actually go through the process tonight of me opening the meeting, and then there'll be a nomination for a chair and a secretary, and we'll go from there. But before we do that, I just want to welcome our newest members who were just recently elected. Nancy Cordell, thank you very much for joining us, and Mike Fitzgerald, thank you as well. I've been there. I was on the Sherborn School Committee back in the 90s, and I know that's a long time ago. You guys may have been in school. But the faces have changed, but the work has not. And this is a great school system. It's a great kind of community activity. So we very much appreciate you coming on board. So with that, I will take a nomination for a chair.
I'd like to nominate Angie Johnson as chair of the Sherborn School Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any resistance? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay. Angie,
Yes.
I now pass it over to you.
Okay, and do we need to nominate for the secretary?
You, yeah.
Okay. So now, because I was secretary and now I'm not, we need to do the same and nominate for a secretary. So I would like to nominate Megan Page as secretary. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Second?
Congratulations to you both.
All right.
Thank you.
So now that we have that out of the way, the next thing we get to do is to hear from one of our CSA co-presidents, Miss Molly Cullum. She's going to inform us what's been happening, which is a lot at Pine Hill.
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of very busy here. Do you want me to?
It's up to you. You can stand if you're comfortable there. You're
I
fine.
don't care. It's wherever you can hear me, I guess, but I do tend to talk loud. So, so the CSA had our last meeting last week of the year, which totally snuck up on us because it has been such a busy, productive year. As you all know, we've had an auction year, so that alone creates the craziness. But I think you guys said you had chatted about it last meeting, which we weren't able to get to. So just recapping this meeting, we exceeded our capacity. So it was great. It was a sold out event. We made net 63,000. So our goal is 60. So we were just slightly above, which is fantastic. A lot of enthusiasm, great support from the teachers, from the parents. We had it off site, seemed to work well. So we're coming in at the end of the year. There's a lot of numbers still coming in, but I believe we'll be either below or at our budget. Part of this is we've had a lot of different fundraising events this year on top of the gala. We did, our normal raffle baskets, and we had our second Monster Mash, our Pine Hill 5K, which is a town favorite. All of that kind of blew the numbers out of the water from what we've done in previous years. So really good participation across the board. So a lot of that will be repeating next year. We also had an end of year picnic kind of as an appreciation to the parents and to the community just for all of their support. So we did a food truck and an ice cream truck and a DJ, and the kids seem to absolutely love it. So that might be a new tradition. We'll see. I liked it as a parent because I didn't have to feed my kid ice cream at 5:30 and then figure out when I'm going to fit in dinner. So that's exciting. And then from there, rolling into next year, looking at new members, all we have open at this point is vice president. So we have 2 co-chair vice presidents that we're looking for. As you may know, we weren't able to find anybody last year. So I have the pleasure of rolling forward as president again with Hannah Ireland behind me. So we will be at the helm next year, and we found some awesome members, and we'll be meeting over the summer to get things rolling. And our first meeting will be in September. Okay.
Well, I do have to say that the gala was a lot of fun. I went, and it was a great show. It was wonderful. It was fun and a lot of fundraising. And I also want to thank you and Amanda for serving this year as presidents, because you all did a fantastic job. You breathed a lot of life into it. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And the kids appreciate it for all the extra things that they get due to the CSA's involvement and funding. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
And if I may mention, in addition to hitting fundraising targets, the CSA was also able to procure enough money to install a set of swings on the. Are you speaking to that? No. Thank you. So at a future meeting, we'll be asking you to accept a donation of a bay of 6 or 8 swings for the front playground.
I think it's awesome. I think they did just a fantastic job this year. Couldn't get over it. So thank you both.
It was fun, I will say. It was very enjoyable. For anybody who's listening that has vice president, it was very.
It really is enjoyable.
You get to realize how much of a part of the school it is.
You do.
It is really rewarding. So.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for coming tonight and telling us all about it.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. So now we move to public comment. I've never handled this before.
Basically, anyone who wants to make a comment,
Okay.
just share their name, address.
Okay. So name and address. All right. So anybody who wishes to comment, you just make sure when you stand up to comment, your name and address. It's kind of like the whole town meeting thing again, which I always forget that, and then they yell at me, "What's your name? What's your address?" And it startles me every time, and I forget what I was going to say. So there we go. So that's the preface of it. So anyone who. Hi.
Yes, thank you. I'm Marion Neutra, 25 Prospect Street in Sherborn. And I'm on the planning board. And as many of you know, some of you have heard of this several times, the planning board and probably a total of maybe 100 participating citizens and 20 different committees have been working on a master plan for the town of Sherborn over the last 4 years. And finally this winter, we completed it and got it published. And I have to say, I think it's great. Not just because I drove the process, but because it is really good. It has so many people's ideas, and it looks forward 10, 20, or 30 years. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about it tomorrow. I think John Higley, the chair of the planning board, and perhaps me and another of the contributors will be talking about the financial planning of the town and how it has to go hand in hand with school, not school budgeting, but school long-term planning. I won't dwell on that now, but just to say that for you who are interested in keeping our schools the great places that they are, the interplay between the planning board decisions on housing and development and the school is should be very close. And you know, we all want to work closely together. We all have limited time, but we're hoping that maybe a better effort is made on both of our sides to think ahead, because of course any capital project has to be planned 8 years in advance before it's ready for kids. So I think anybody who wants to read this would find the whole kind of financial picture of the town interesting, but there's a lot more. Actually, the financial part is a small part of this. We also, we have a section on housing, on natural resources and open space, and almost every section has something that could involve the schools. So I don't want to take more time because some of you will hear more about it tomorrow night, but I just wanted to present 3 copies. I had no idea how many copies to bring. And if everyone on the school committee wants a copy, we certainly have enough for you. So I brought 3 just for a start. We only ask that when you go off school committee, you pass it to the person coming on. But I hope you can use this, and we'll talk about it more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any?
Hi, I'm Katie Garvey at 37 Greenwood Street, and I have a 3rd grader, a 1st grader, and a rising kindergartner. And there's a group of us here that came to express our concern about the rising kindergarten class and the size of it. I know it's sort of a moving target in terms of the numbers. It seems like the numbers have increased a bit from kindergarten orientation. But it is something we were all concerned about, and we were trying to figure out if more kids were to move into town, because a lot of houses on the market, what would happen. And I don't know, you're going to talk a little bit about that, or I should keep going and ask more questions. So I don't really know.
You want to respond?
So, I don't want to interrupt you, though.
No.
Okay. So, yes, we love having as many people here tonight as we do, but sometimes when we are just by ourselves and having the conversations about our enrollments and stuff, people don't necessarily hear it unless they're at home watching on TV, and I get the feeling that that doesn't happen that often. So, yes, we've had quite a few conversations about the enrollments for next year, and we do every year because we're a small system. So, we typically fluctuate in these 3 to 4 sections. So you can either have 3 large sections, or sometimes I guess 5, 4 large sections, or 5 large sections. 3 large sections, or 4 large sections, or 5 very small sections, or 4 very small sections. It fluctuates that much because if you only have 75 students, for example, and you're running 3 sections, that'd be 25. That's big. But if you jumped it up to 4 sections, they drop down to like 16, 17s, which is nice, but it's always in flux. And that's the same for Dover. We just had that conversation before this meeting. And so what we've done over time is the administration has developed a process of kind of projecting what we think our enrollments will be like. We know that over time, a kindergarten class grows typically. When it goes up to 5th grade, it's usually larger in 5th grade. And we've seen that pattern play out. We look at the 10 years past, and then from that 10 years past, we try to form projections. And our projections have been pretty close. They're good, but they're not exact. And no one can predict whether those houses are going to sell or they're not, or whether those are families moving in with high school aged kids or middle school aged kids or elementary aged kids. There's so much uncertainty in this process. And so what we and Dover, frankly, have is a set of guidelines that stand as our kind of, we keep our class sizes within those guidelines. We stick pretty hard to that. Advisory depends on us kind of honoring those guidelines, because if you didn't have them, you'd be inclined to say every time you get over 20, you know what, we'll add a section, we'll go down to 12, 13 kids. How awesome would that be? The problem is that that's not really realistic, as we just heard this person talking about the planning of kind of the future of Sherborn. We do have to be mindful of how our asks impact Sherborn's budget each year. So we try to be really thoughtful about that. We went through this process this year, really looking closely at our numbers, looking at our projections, and we think we're going to be okay. And you have seen, as you correctly note, it went up first a little bit, and then it dropped back down. That's pretty typical, and that's what we call the inward and outward migration. We have families coming and families going. And we just never really know definitively, really, until October 15th. The state requires us to submit a report on our enrollments on October 15th. And the reason they wait till October 15th is because you actually don't know at Labor Day, because they're still moving. There's still families going out and families coming in, because people still think, well, I'm still at the start of school, I could move and get the kid registered, and they wouldn't only miss a week. So it's a really tricky and inexact science. It's more of an art. But what I do want to say, with all of that said, what I do want to say is that as the administration, side of this, we do watch these numbers really, really closely. And if we feel as if the numbers are at that tipping point where we have to request a change or make a change, we'll first look to see if we have any place within our existing budget. So sometimes we'll have some sections that are actually kind of low, and there might be 4 not that high sections that if you bumped one of those sections from the 4 down to a kindergarten, for example, you might be able to cover that cost within your existing budget. And yes, those other older kids might have slightly larger class sizes, but still within the guideline. So that would be our typical first response. If we see that we're in trouble, we look at our other sections to see where we could potentially move a teacher to cover a particular bubble of kids. If that doesn't happen, then yes, in the past, both in Dover and Sherborn, it's come up where we've had to go back to the town and say we didn't budget enough. It's unfortunate. It's kind of embarrassing for us. We don't like that to happen. So we do everything we can to get it right because the town's counting on us to have our figures straight. So that's what I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in the enrollment section, which is a little later in the budget. But that in a nutshell is how we've gotten to where we are. But I'm not sure if that was clear. Yes?
Can I just ask Elizabeth Hoffman, 48 Page Farm Road in Sherborn? Can I ask just a clarifying question? When you talk about reallocating teachers, so my understanding is this year, the current 2nd grade and current 5th grade both have 4 sections, but the 5th graders are graduating and we're not keeping that 4th head that it's been
Reallocated.
right. So we can't reallocate the teacher. So the only section left would be the rising 3rd graders.
I'm not looking at the numbers right in front of me, but there is a section somewhere, if it was 3rd or 4th.
Well, one teacher's moving.
Only
One teacher's
I have a child in
moving.
both
Yeah.
of those grades.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that is, there is only one place that we could look, and I believe it's the one you're talking about.
right, which is pretty large.
It would push those kids up to a similar kind of situation where it's close to the top of our guideline, but it's still within our guideline. And so,
So either one is within the guideline. You're saying which one pushes more would be
Well,
the determining factor?
I think Sherborn, Sherborn sets up their guidelines differently than Dover, where they try to keep their numbers lower at the early elementary, and they allow them to be larger at the upper elementary, whereas Dover just has one set number all the way through. So I think the thinking on Sherborn's part is that the youngest kids are the ones who need the greatest attention because they're first coming into school and they're just entering school. And so, the thinking is, can we keep those numbers smaller? That's what the guideline suggests. And as they get older, you could have larger sizes. So I guess we would have to have that conversation about whether or not we think it would be better to have that section applied to kindergarten or to the 3rd grade. But
Right. 3 years ago, we added a 4th section for this year's current 7th graders when they were going into, I don't know if it was 4th or 5th grade. I think it might have been 5th. So kind of, making a different point that it's later in the process as they're getting ready to transition to middle school that it's really important that they have another teacher. So I think the argument can be made at any grade and any age, and maybe the actual number is really important. My question, I guess, is if both of these numbers are big, and I know we just talked about the plan and you mentioned the budget, what would it take to add another teacher to the budget so that both the rising 3rd graders and the rising kindergartners have 4 sections? It would still be only 2 grades in the school that have 4, which is this year's current budget situation.
I mean, I think we take that on a case-by-case basis, but I feel like I do feel obligated to honor those guidelines. So if we're exceeding those guidelines, to me, that's the obvious turning point. But if we're at 23.9 and the guideline is 24, which it is not, it's
23 at the K through 3.
Thank you. 23 at the K through 3. So if it's 22.75, are we getting to that 23? And so I feel personally that that's important, that those guidelines are in place and that we work to adhere to them. If we go over them, it seems obvious to me. That's an easy decision. But when you're close, that's where it gets tougher. And so that's why I say it's a case-by-case basis. And that's why I mentioned earlier that we really have to watch how this goes through the summer, because we've seen this before where the numbers looked terrible, and by the time the school year sifted out, it worked out that it was pretty close to our projections. That happens a lot. It's not to say there can't be blips where it doesn't swing consistently the way they're projections for a reason, because this is what we're projecting, but we're not guaranteeing. So we found, though, that those projections are usually pretty close, which would put us within our guidelines across all grades. We just, we understand that people are anxious about it, and we're watching too, for sure, even though we love the company.
I have a question. Molly Cullum, 3 Greenwood Street. So if things did swing, I'm not usually a what-if person, but if they did and our kids are communicated on the last day of school, the 4 sections, this is our children I have a daughter in 2nd going to 3rd, move-up day happens on the last day, they find out their teachers, there's a huge swing, and would you still shift things around potentially if you took a section away after classes have been communicated?
I don't know that we've done that. I haven't been here long enough to know if that's been done before. But my guess is that it's happened in the summer, that decisions have been made that we had to shift staffing around. And when that happens, you simply would have to give kids opportunities in the summer or before school opens for them to meet if it's changed at all.
And I don't want to say that so we lose move-up day, because I love it. It's a wonderful thing for our kids, and my kids love it.
Currently, our rising 3rd graders would not be within the guideline if we reduced a section.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Wouldn't you know that most of our new students moving in have kindergartners and 3rd graders? Plenty of room in 2nd grade.
Okay.
Cindy Costanzo, 27 Corsbrook Road. And I think a lot of us are here, we have rising 3rd graders, and we were the largest class when we entered kindergarten, and that was, that was a big concern for us. And now there were 3 sections in kindergarten, then a 4th section came on in 1st grade, and now you're talking about taking away that 4th section for our kids again. And we are all here because we feel that's unfair to our children who have already went into kindergarten with the large classes. Then they were given the extra teacher, and now all of a sudden we're facing again like we're gonna take that away from you.
So the extra section is going up with the 3rd grade.
Yeah. So it is.
Yeah.
Because we've heard, this is the reason why we're all here, because we've heard so many different rumors,
Right.
and we
So-
just wanted some clarification as to.
No, that teacher, that 4 is moving up to the next grade and probably will continue because that group is an outlier.
Because it's been around, there's been talk around the town, there's been so many different rumors that none of us really knew or do fully understand when we're gonna know what's going on, how many classrooms are there gonna be, so.
Yeah, and I might have misunderstood, but Dr. Brown, I thought you just said if we did go back to 3 sections, it would still be underneath the guideline.
We are welcoming 6 new children to that grade level, and to our knowledge, we're only losing 1 student from that grade level. So we would not be within guideline if we reduced a section for our rising 3rd graders.
So we are scared.
So then our section will not get reduced to 3, the rising 3rd graders.
Right.
Unless there was a large population of kids who unexpectedly left this summer.
I'm Andrea Kelly, 93 Maple Street, and I have a rising 3rd grader and twin rising kindergartners. And the difference between the large kindergarten class that the rising third grader had and the first grade was like night and day. And the growth was so much bigger in first grade for her because it was just going into school in such a large class for your first year. But for our experience anyway, was that it was just way too many kids. And the reason why we moved here was for the school system. So I'm very concerned about the rising kindergarten class. I know that we have guidelines, but from my understanding from a lot of other parents, I think you have done a lot of research on it, that our guidelines for kindergarten seem to be larger than the surrounding communities.
Of comparable school districts.
We also have, don't we have, in each classroom we have a full-time
assistant?
Yeah, they have that as well.
There were only 2 districts in kindergarten that had part-time assistants that, again, were comparable school districts to ours. Most had full-time assistants, save for Sudbury and I think it was Lexington. And they had a guideline of 21 to 22 students per class versus our 23.
Oh, there's 23. That's all.
23. So that is something that's come up in the past, just from sitting here, that, is something that school committee can address. And I think there's been talk about looking at that closer and being more in line with your counterpart in Dover that does a K through 5, 17 to 22. So that's what they operate under. So that's a topic that this committee could do research and put forward a policy change, because it is in your policy.
Right, and that's something we didn't have to go to advisory, do we not, or do we? No.
You'd obviously, they would be here to voice, but that is something that has full ability to address.
I mean, one of the challenges for these tiny little districts, and especially Sherborn, is that we don't have the Natick Mall. We don't have a commercial base at all. So we're entirely dependent, other than what you see downtown, dependent on a residential tax base. And we have worked really closely with advisory and heard the messaging from the community that they need our help to be responsible. So we're trying to be responsible. My number one priority is to the kids. That's my responsibility as the superintendent, is to make sure that the kids have the best possible educational setting that we can provide. But that doesn't mean that I can then have permission to be completely dismissive of all those other concerns on the other side. And our tax rate in Massachusetts is at the top. And that's actually factoring in to home sales. It's a concern, and especially in comparison to Dover. So it's not. I don't think when we talk about class sizes, we have no choice, especially as we go through the budget process, to think about this entire big picture, because we're reminded when we sit down with advisory and with the Board of Selectmen and at town meetings, we're reminded that it's a difficult situation right now for Sherborn, and so we try to be as thoughtful as we can. It's a very, 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 very tight line to try and walk, but we do feel that thus far we've been pretty good about it, and we monitor as need be. We have to pay attention.
I will add, though, that the money that would have paid for that teacher that was reduced was put back into the school as a literacy specialist. So there is additional educational support being added to the school in totality. So it wasn't like that money was given back to the town. It was reallocated into another very important position within the school budget.
Yes.
Alexis Madison, 21 Snow Street, and thank you for pointing that out, because my children use that service, so I know that that's a much needed service, so it's nice to hear that's what it went to. I have a couple of questions. One, if there were the ability to enact emergency funds, which I would just like to understand further how that happens, is there even space at Pine Hill to add a classroom for kindergarten? Because that might just be a moot point from the beginning.
There's always an opportunity to be more creative with space.
Mr. Gimlet will move out and we will build it.
Well, yeah, there's we have some classroom size rooms that are being used for other kinds of services. And I'm sure we could come up with a plan to house speech pathology, for example, in a smaller space, so we could have a classroom.
Okay.
So don't let that be
I won't.
something that
Break
keeps you
down
up at
walls.
night. Yeah.
To better understand emergency funds, if that is something that were ever on the table, is that something that could be tapped into, and how challenging is it, et cetera? It's something that's been floated out there to all of us, and just to better understand what it is and how difficult it is to get, I guess.
Well, it requires us going back to the town and saying that we don't have enough money in our existing budget to meet our needs. And then the town has to approve funding for us.
Okay.
So it's been done before, but it's not something that's, it's not like standard practice.
Okay.
It's really very unusual.
Okay.
So I don't want to give this notion that, that's just, we just call on the town and they'll just give us the money. It's not that simple at all.
And I know we talk a lot about not so much quantity at Pine Hill, but quality, and we look a lot at our students and the composition of a classroom. And so I'm curious to know how maybe this incoming kindergarten class, the makeup of either special needs or children on IEPs, perhaps are different from that rising third grade class, better, worse, how that influences this larger class size dynamic, and maybe the guideline is a great thing, but maybe it no longer is the status quo as our children's needs change, as anxiety is on the rise, all of these things for an incoming first-time school class. What does that look like, and how, I guess, have we addressed that? Seeing as that rising third grade class, we did end up adding a section to. Was it because it was just too challenging at that size? Was it the makeup of the class? What are our learnings?
I think that as you go further on, because I have a middle schooler and a soon-to-be senior, the subject matter just gets more and more, and you need more instructional time. You need a lot in kindergarten, but there's more of, we're going to sit down, we're going to do all the math now, we're going to do all of this. And so I think as you keep going, that was one reason for making sure that we had more balance, because there are more kids, and you don't have the full-time aide in there, if I'm not mistaken, all like you do in the kindergarten. So I think those are some considerations. And I don't know if we can address at this moment, how it's broken down. For instance, my son, when he was in kindergarten, we didn't know there was an issue. And then we worked through it, and now he's fine. So, he wasn't assessed because we came from Atlanta. So I'm just not sure that we can address that. And it's like Dr. Keogh said, I think, unfortunately, it's very fluid at this moment. I can tell you that I walked into Pine Hill middle of August in 2014 and was greeted by Dr. Brown, and I said, I have 2 students for you. She just kind of wrapped us up and took us in, and so it was great. So that's what I mean. Things can change. People can come, people can go, because I know when I came in, another family with a family of 4, 3 of which were at Pine Hill, left. So I actually we still lost one. So I think what we're going to have to do is look and see, and we're not saying it's a done deal that it's stagnant at this moment or that moment. And we're not saying that if a ton move in, sure, we'll have to do something. What it is, we'll just have to sit down and figure it out. We'll have to go to town or do whatever. But unfortunately, I don't think we'll know all these answers probably until August. We won't know everything.
And I would say, in addition to that, it's because it's fluid.
Yeah.
All of the options will be looked at.
Yeah.
They have to be.
Because at the end of the day, it's the best interest of the kids. And we know that's why we're all here. And that's why everybody, volunteers on the committee and volunteers at CSA. And, I'm with you. I get it. Believe me, I have 3. I came from Atlanta, where I had them in a very small private school. I do have to say their education is much better here. So, it is unfortunately not an exact science at this moment, but we're going to try our hardest. And Dr. Keogh and I'll be working at it all summer. And Dawn, who is wonderful with showing us, the budget and how we do things. So, we're not going to let, 30 kids be in a classroom. We're not going to overburden classrooms. Don't let that be the pressing point. And if as a committee, this is obviously something that we'll probably have to look at as our numbers keep increasing. I mean, Sherborn is apparently very popular. I do love it. So we'll look at that as a committee to see are our guidelines within the guidelines, of our counterparts and people like us.
And as a clarifier, with the current cohort of second graders who were within but abutting guideline when they were in 3 sections in kindergarten, and through our budget process, which is contingent on our enrollment projections in some part, we made the decision to add a section because we knew that cohort would only grow as our cohorts do to some proportion. So, so that was proactively looked at before that class got to first grade, and that's what we do every year.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we would like to see. At what point in the process does that start being considered, if it's not for kindergarten, for future first grade? When does that start being discussed so we can be part of the conversation or at least aware of it? That would be great to know.
Are we at 64 now? Is that the number? I know, as you said, it had been 69, then 68. I think it's 64.
I think it is 64 at this moment.
And the second graders, when they were in kindergarten, it was 62.
Yeah.
So, but as you said, they grew, and in first grade got another section.
Right.
So it's close to the same situation. I mean, 2 more students right now.
What are the third graders at? What are the rising third graders?
What are they at now?
74.
60.
They're not currently at 74, but they will be at 74.
They will be at 74.
Can I just?
There, I don't understand that. I had in my numbers that the current second grade is at 68.
And we're gaining 6 and we're losing 1.
We know that, or?
Yep, they were signed, sealed, and delivered. Yep.
Gotcha.
It says 5 here in the packet. It says we're gaining 5 and losing 1.
I think since the packet went
We
out.
got a call yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Sorry.
It's fluid.
Friday
So
afternoon.
that's the best
Cheryl
evidence.
sent your packet.
That's the best evidence I've heard today of how these things fluctuate, and that's why it's impossible for us. It's pure speculation at this point.
Right.
We don't know. The numbers could actually, if our projections hold true, and they've been pretty solid, we should be fine and within our guidelines.
And if I may add as well, with incoming kindergartners, as you know, a lot of parents are on the fence about sending or holding, particularly children with summer birthdays. So our numbers fluctuating in part have been because word of mouth, thank you, has gotten out to a lot of our incoming kindergarten families through the orientation sessions, especially that we had a week and a half ago. And families who were on the fence we're certainly not trying to force their hand at a decision, but they appreciate if they've made a decision, they're no longer, they've been clear with us about that. And we've also deferred accepting METCO students.
Right.
Chickering will get METCO
Chickering,
students next year in kindergarten. Obviously are to be prudent about enrollment there. So that's why our numbers have fluctuated over the last week or two.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Ranjani Dowley, 37 Nason Hill Road. It sounds like a lot of this is determined by our guidelines 17 to 23. Is that what it is, 23? So as parents, when is the time of year that we could come and during the budgeting that you guys are doing for the future year to take a look and think about how we as parents, if we're saying 23 sounds really, and by the way, I'm a former MA public school teacher and very randomly have a PhD in education, so I understand how class actually isn't, it has to do with the teacher and how they're differentiating instruction, all of these things. I'm just grateful to be in the school district in general. But as a parent, when you think, gut means, as we're getting to 23 versus 20, my kid's gonna get a little bit better attention. So how, whether that's, true or not, because every teacher at Pine Hill is amazing. So as parents, what's the time of year that we can best advocate to say, for next year and for future, I actually don't have an incoming kindergartner this year. So if I were to say next year, how can we talk about 17 to 22? if it is reflective of other towns, and I'm saying I don't know, I don't have the answer, but when would we best be able to come and have that conversation? Because it sounds like those conversations took place, and sorry, I wasn't there during some wintry night when that happened.
We put in our budget, what, March is when our budget?
Your first budget's presented in November.
We present our first budget in November, and it's finalized by March. In March. Because our budget, unfortunately, we have to go to the town, so we have to present it at town meeting, and it has to be accepted there, because we're in a little small town. Everything kind of runs a little quirky. I mean, if you've ever been to that thing where you nominate people, at first I thought I was in some movie. I'm like, what is going on? This is wild. But, we have to present it to town and they have to accept it. So we have a lot of conversations with the selectmen, with the advisory board about these are our numbers and, are we in the ballpark? Are we not in the ballpark? How does it look? Because we all have to settle within the town numbers too of what money we have.
And do the guidelines get discussed in November?
No, that's a policy decision apparently by our committee. So that's something that we'll have to assess if that's something that, we see as Sherborn keeps growing, that we're going to have to try to figure out what to do, So that would be a policy decision on the committee. But we'd also have to look to, I think, the town to see, what is feasible, because we also, like she said, we do have some space, but there are space constraints. If we added one section for 3 different levels, I think we'd be bumping up against the edge of our space. So there's a lot to consider. Sherborn's a great place to live. I think the word got out and everyone came. So, but we will work diligently. And like I said, over the summer, it fluctuates. I didn't even know I was moving to Massachusetts until July 1st. It was a shock to me. I'd never even been to Boston, and yet here I am. So. Well,
I should say, because as we're going to talk about, I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but our projections actually show us down from this year.
We're going down by 6 students.
I don't want to give the wrong impression that we're projecting our numbers to be higher than last year, because we're actually projecting them to be 5 lower.
6 lower.
6 lower, sorry.
And we're promoting 83 rising kindergarten, 5th graders. So, that's our largest cohort.
So it's just, as I said, it's just not an exact thing. And because we're small, we don't run 20 sections like Brookline. We have a small number of sections. One reduction or addition of a section makes all the difference in the world. That was an issue when I was on the school committee in Sherborn, and I'm sure when Don was on the school committee in Dover. One section can make all the difference in the world because we're small. So we just have to watch it and monitor it and pay attention and live within our guidelines. I do think that that's important. If the committee makes a decision to change that policy, I'm sure there'll be weigh-in from community members on both sides of it, because it's a big discussion.
Dr. King, what did you mean that we're projecting down?
We're actually projecting our numbers to be lower in total next year than
Your
this
current
year.
enrollment.
This current enrollment's 385. The school enrollment next year is projected at 379. Currently, we're at 385.
Thank you.
So we're less 6.
If I could just get clarification, so you said that we won't lose I have a twin rising 3rd graders. We won't lose our 4th for next year, but it's a possibility going forward.
I will, if I can, just say on that decision has not been made. That's why I said everything is on the table in this process, and it has to be. I don't think that we can say unequivocally, because if we looked at it currently, it actually is it's a little below guideline if you were to go with 3 sections. You said that there's those numbers coming in, so that's different. If it went over the guideline, then I think we would have a problem taking from that. But it can fluctuate. So that's why I said kind of all of the things are on the table, because we have to monitor it the whole way through.
Okay, so I guess then my question becomes, it goes back to, so we could be telling our kids in the middle of the summer, sorry, that teacher that you just learned about isn't really your teacher, and we have to adjust that? Am I hearing that correctly? That you just don't know whether or not you'll take our 4th to give?
I'd say that's conceivable.
If
But
I'm
at
not
the
mistaken, that may have happened a few summers ago, because there was one summer, maybe 2 years ago, where we didn't find out on the
No.
last
Right.
school.
Right, that's
That
true.
probably in the summer. I don't know if that had anything to do with why, but
I'm pretty sure that happened when my children were coming
Yeah.
through, and they meet their teacher later in the summer. It's just, these are the kind of challenges of the small system.
Easy question.
We in fact, when my children were at Pine Hill School, we had 2 grades together, multi-age classroom. Well, the multi-age classroom was for the benefit of the students because it was multi-age and they benefit from growing with each other, but it also happened to help our enrollment bubble at one of the grades as opposed to the other. So Pine Hill School and I'm sure Chickering have had to be creative.
Can we go over the guideline though?
No.
Okay. So if we're at 74 teachers, or 74 kids.
You can have one
divided by
class
3
over guidelines.
teachers, we're over.
Yeah, we wouldn't.
Can't take the no. But
We-
I
we-
just wanted to, so we can't
So
go past the guideline.
let me be clear.
Yeah,
Okay, it's a guideline.
so that's what I'm
So-
asking, can we go over the guideline?
Yes, so you could have one section that was 24 and 3 that were 23.
Okay,
That has happened before on both sides of the river.
right.
And it happens at all levels and throughout the district,
But if
including
all
up here at the
classes
region.
are over, would you go over?
If all classes
If
were
all
over,
classes were over 23? If
I
all
don't-
4 classes, or 3 classes were over?
you know what, I would want to see all the factors that were weighing into it.
But it's a possibility, that's all I wanted to know, is that if we could go over the guideline, it's not like a
It's a
mandate.
guideline, so we try to honor the guideline.
Okay.
All right.
Giles Lumley Cook, 41 Whitney Street. I think one of the I'm new to this whole thing, so excuse my ignorance. I think one of the frustrating things is how binary it is. I know that you either have a classroom with a teacher or you don't. What about mitigating, what about other things you can do to mitigate these issues? It's not, if there's suddenly 21 kids in the class or 22, that's not a high five. Awesome, we're not over the limit. It is still a higher density of students than, of course, a lower number. So are we really handcuffed by just classrooms binary on and off? Is there anything else that can be done to say this is a big class, so we need an additional partial resource? It just seems a little, it seems like we don't have very many options. We have one option.
Well, it's not a big class. A big class is our 83 students leaving. That's a big class for Pine Hill School. So we've had much bigger classes. This is actually a fairly average size class for Pine Hill. So
from kindergarten.
If we were to start today with 66 kids, we have 68 in second grade, we have 62 in third, 64 in fourth, 83 in our outgoing fifth. It's just, if you look at the trends over time, it fluctuates. So.
But you had said earlier that classes typically grow over time. So on average, do classes pick up 2 or 3 kids a year? If we're starting as one of the largest kindergarten classes, comparing us to classes that have grown over time, and our kindergarten class will grow over time, that's a false comparison, right? Wouldn't you want to compare it to other kindergartens?
I think it depends. I don't think they necessarily, I'm just thinking of my own children's experience, necessarily pick up more kids as they go along. In some cases, they've lost kids. I think the other thing to keep in mind is the kindergartners have full-time assistants, but there are so many support people floating around Pine Hill. There's OT support, there's math specialists, there's literacy specialists. There are multiple adults in classrooms at many different times, even if there's not a full-time aide assigned to the classrooms. So kids are getting lots of support in addition to the classroom teacher. And I'm sure that, I can't speak to your process, but I'm sure you think about the needs of the kids in those particular rooms and put people where you know you need them.
I guess if there were any way to shift some of those resources to the relatively larger classes, and if this ends up being this relatively small class, fine. I think it would be great if there were other things besides, yes, we're at 4 sections or 3 sections, because then it just seems very binary, and I think if it were more of a continuum, then it seems like it would be more of a fair, it would seem like it would be more fair to the students.
Well, I think what we're going to have to do is just, look at it as a year-by-year basis, because we're going to start with the kindergarten, see where we go, and see how we need to add or whatever. And we do have a lot of support at Pine Hill. There's a lot of support teachers, and that's just like the literacy specialist that we employed. We didn't have a full-time on staff all the time until now. Chickering does. And you can see that in some of the scores and some of the support. So we want to make sure that we, supplement where we need to. So the children, I don't think, I can honestly say I came from the city of Atlanta. I paid for private school for 3 children. And I paid a lot. And my 3rd grader, when he got up here, he was in 4th grade. His class that I paid for in Atlanta was 24 students. And I paid roughly $26,000 for 24 students. It's a lot. So I don't think we're outside of the realm. And I think we're going to work with it as best as we can. And no child will, believe me, get left behind. I mean, if there's anything, I do know that the teachers are dedicated.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, we're just looking back at the last 8 kindergarten classes on average, other than the rising 3rd graders, never broke 20 kids per class. So it's just a big difference over the last decade.
And that was my point earlier about sort of making the true comparison, comparing the kindergarten class to the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade class. It's not the right comparison. It's if we typically see what was that class back in kindergarten. And that was my only point.
And these were all 3-section kindergarten grades.
Well, yeah, because that's all the classrooms we have in the kindergarten section, and it's just 3, so there won't be.
I think the graduating seniors from last year were massive. They had 4, and I don't think we've seen more than 1 class with 4 kindergarten sections since then. So it's just, this is a very different year.
And I think we're just going to have to address it as it comes. I mean, the ones who are undecided, if it's a summer birthday issue, I do have to say I have 2 summer birthdays, and I held both of them back. If I had not, it would have been a disaster. So I'm just saying. So.
It's good for them.
Yeah.
It turns out to be much better to hold them back.
It's better. And they're boys. So
Especially
they would have been,
the boys.
Yeah, they would have been the smallest on the sports team and the last ones to drive. It would have just not fared so well. So anyway, if you're wondering. But anyway, thank you for your comments. We're going to take all of this, of course, and like I said, if you have any questions, we're all on the website for Dover Sherborn. You can email us. I'm sure you'll see us in town because it's just not that big. But we'll figure it out. I mean, it's not, and I think you'll be surprised in the summer because, like you said, somehow it just works out. I don't know how, but it does. People come and they go, and there's a lot of houses for sale, and I think if some people can sell, they're going. So. Thank you. Yeah.
Just how will we be kept abreast of as the numbers go up and down? Who do we reach out to, or what's our best source?
You can reach out to me or anyone on the board. Okay. We won't have the numbers, until we get them from the school. I mean, and like you said, it's October is when we really report those numbers.
Right.
But you'll get your class list, and I don't know how they're going to do that this year. If you're gonna let them meet them on the last day.
We were planning to do business as usual.
Do business because I know one year one of mine did not meet people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And that's fine. So, I mean, I guess just you can email us. You can see. I don't know if we'll post anything, so that's probably the easiest way.
Okay.
Find me at church.
But we do discuss enrollments. We give a presentation on enrollments to the school committee every year in October and January, I believe. And it's all part of the budget process so that we can project. So there's believe it or not, been a lot of conversation about these figures over the course of the year, and we will continue to watch them.
Okay. All right.
Very good.
So let's move on to the next. It is the administrative reports. Dr. Brown.
Well, Dr. Keogh I asked Cheryl, you're okay with me mentioning new faculty publicly? I asked her to check with you.
I didn't have a conversation with her.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but
it's in print.
packet.
Right.
So it's in public. Yeah.
They're all existing or
It's
vetted
official
by
now.
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, allow me the pleasure of introducing faculty assigned to some of our new hires. Our literacy specialist position has been filled by Jen Ryan. She's a longstanding exemplar teacher at Pine Hill School. I know, obviously we're sad to pull her out of a classroom position where she'll have close contact with some children on an annual basis. But we're delighted that she will have the benefit to touch and shape the education for all children at Pine Hill School. In her role as a literacy specialist, she'll be coaching classroom teachers, specifically in Readers and Writers Workshop model, in analysis of assessments and planning for instruction, small group, individual, whole group, etc., working in collaboration with her job-alike colleague at Chickering and our middle school ELA curriculum coordinators. So she's got a big role that we've got a lot of hopes and dreams hanging on this role to bring consistency with our reading and writing instruction within and across grade levels and higher levels of student engagement, moving from more traditional practices to more authentic literacy experiences for our students. Sarah Richards, our art teacher, is retiring after her 32-year career at Pine Hill School. We had a most lovely faculty reception for her last week. Thank you for coming, Dr. Keough. I know it was graduation day and your dance card was quite full that particular day. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot.
It was my pleasure.
Sarah has really touched students in so many ways. In her quiet and creative way, and we look forward to continuing the connections that are so that the art curriculum really lends to connecting with kids' creative side and individuality and it's a powerful place for teaching and learning. So without further ado, we did a search. We interviewed we had 3 top candidates that we invited back. We, of course, vetted them in front of our first grade students because that's where one really has to work for connection and authenticity, not just talk the talk behind closed doors with us grown-ups. Kevin Barry rose to the top. He has been he was a classroom teacher in Natick. He came to us as an educational assistant about 5 years ago at Pine Hill School. He's worked with most grade levels, particularly 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, supporting students with special education needs. He has an art career as a children's book illustrator. And most importantly, he has an uncanny ability to connect with students. So he rose to the top, and we're very excited to welcome him in the art teacher position. We are adding additional special education staff at Pine Hill Schools who will service our students. Next year, it will look like supporting some students in kindergarten and 1st grade who have developmental delays or autism spectrum disorder or perhaps some complex neurological learning challenges. And that we're calling it the GOALS program. The GOALS is the acronym for Generalization of Academics, Learning, and Social Skills. And this special education teacher will have a bit of a more specialized lens around executive functioning and behavior regulation, sensory regulation, language, communication, social skills. And again, we did a full search. We brought candidates in from near and far. And the candidate who really most readily met our criteria for success is located already right at Pine Hill School in our Lee Jeffries. Lee Jeffries has been a longstanding employee in our preschool program this year. She is one of the three preschool classroom teachers, and she has a strong ability to communicate with families, mentor staff, related service providers, and teaching assistants who work in her room and with the students. Most importantly, the students under her tutelage make amazing growth, and we're really excited to move her from preschool to our kindergarten, first grade. The students who are matriculating out of preschool and are used to more of an integrated level of support. That's the lineup of new faculty. In addition, we continue, as you can see from the following 2 pages, we're not slowing down. It always is my personal pet peeve when people say, oh, you must be winding down. And as you know, in this business, we race until we hit the splat on the wall on June 14th. And so there are many, many wonderful celebrations of student learning, culminating team building activities in our 5th graders going to Hill Reservation. There are some plays and wax museums and all kinds of fun events going on at Pine Hill. It is my intent to communicate close to the last day of school, reminding parents that they will be able to view student report cards in the parent portal, and also letting them know, to the best of my ability, on such and such a date, our projection of teacher assignments for the following year. I know we've talked a little bit about at CSA and at school committee and school advisory council. We are taking an opportunity to continue to build our professional teaching teams, and that involves, for next year, that looks like moving 5 teachers around. So for about 25% of our classroom teaching staff, we're really looking to cross-pollinate cerebral horsepower and passion and energy, and I'm confident that that we're poised to greet students next year.
All right. Thank you. Next is the Assistant Superintendent's report.
So I'm going to go as quickly as possible. My report was brief, as you'll be getting a lot more information tomorrow night at the Joint Committee meeting, but I'm happy to answer any questions. That being said, I know that at one point there was a request for additional information about what the Academic Innovation Committee has actually been doing. So I thought I would give you a brief overview of our work this year. So as you know, one bucket of the strategic plan is focused entirely on innovative teaching and learning practices, and we hope to maintain the excellence and rigor that Dover and Sherborn are known for, while adapting to meet the needs of a changing world. We heard that Sherborn has plans to change. The world outside of Dover and Sherborn are changing as well, and we need to be able to keep up in order to maintain our excellence. So that being said, the essential question was, what do our graduates need for success in college, career, and life in the 21st century? It's a pretty big question. There was a lot of research to be done. So we brought together the Academic Innovation Committee, which was comprised of students, teachers, administrators, parents, and community members, totaling 59 people, which is a lot of faces. However, we came together, we broke up into groups, we did a lot of individual work within groups and then consensus building over time. The idea was to create a portrait of a graduate, which is literally a portrait that indicates the soft skills that we want our students to graduate with in order to be prepared for college, career, and life. So we needed to research what those skills and attributes would be. We wanted to build consensus because obviously parents, teachers, students, and community members all have a vested interest in the future of our kiddos. We wanted to make sure that our vision for the future was inclusive of all those voices and perspectives. We're going to use these skills in this portrait to help build a framework for our teaching and learning. What does teaching and learning in the classroom look like moving forward? How do we assess these skills, and how do we give students feedback so they can grow and master them by graduation? And in doing that, we want to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our kiddos, no matter what they look like or how they learn. So examples of portraits from other districts. Here's Shrewsbury's public schools. You'll notice that they're all soft skills listed there: global citizenship and engagement, innovation, resilience. Another example. I thought this one was great, the Yellow Jackets. thoughtful problem solver, respectful collaborator. Needham just finished theirs. Here's their portrait of a graduate, creative thinkers and problem solvers, responsible and resilient individuals. You're starting to hear themes here. Wellesley, Amanda sat on that committee, has their portrait finalized. And ours you'll be seeing this fall, because right now it's under construction with our graphic designer and some wordsmithing work behind the scenes. So what did we do? We came together 3 times at Pine Hill School for 3 hours each. So in January, we came together to say, what is the work that we have to do? Between January and April, we had a whole lot of work to do in reading and researching and community events. In April, we came back together to say, okay, what did we learn over those 3 months? And then how does that, therefore, in May, get culminized and synthesized into a visual that has the competencies listed? So that January to April window, there's 2 screenings that the community was invited to that all the academic innovation members attended, most likely to succeed and beyond measure. They're both available in Prime for anybody who'd like to watch them. We had an industry think tank panel discussion, as well as a college in the 21st century panel discussion, and I'll talk about those more in a minute, but you'll see how we're stretching to see the skills that the kids need for college, career, and life all wrapped in. So again, the documentaries we saw, you're welcome to see. The next 3, Dr. Wagner's presentation and the 2 panel discussions, the videos are online on the website, so you're welcome to watch all 6 hours in your spare time if you'd like. Otherwise, here's the snapshot. On our first meeting in January, we had the opportunity, Tony Wagner is a professor at Harvard, and he has been doing work on this specific topic for 20 years. He's written a number of books, including Most Likely to Succeed, which led to the documentary. And so we Skyped him in and said, what can you tell us, and give us his clip notes. So he said over his 20 years of interviewing lots and lots and lots of people, critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration, agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurship, effective oral and written communication, access and analyzing information, and curiosity and imagination were of the top skills that we should consider. That being said, understanding kind of the landscape of the educational system in the United States, he said that he has found basically 5 contradictions between what is happening in our classrooms today and what should be happening in our classrooms in order to develop these skills. The first one is that we currently focus on individual achievements with grades and GPAs, where it really should be a lot of group work. Innovation is a team sport, as he said, and that often in the real world, people don't work in isolation. He thought our siloed and distinct disciplines and courses, such as history and English and math, was outdated, and that we should be looking to solve world problems through an interdisciplinary lens. Teacher-directed learning, where the teacher stands in front of the classroom, again, is contradictory to the fact that students should be at the center of the learning and doing most of the talking and the working and the thinking during class time. The F word, as he calls it, otherwise known as failure, he says that's a problem because students should be given multiple opportunities to fail without penalty. He believes grades should include A, B, and incomplete because you're not at the A and B level yet. And that we currently motivate students through grades and awards, where really what we want to do is create intrinsic motivation where kids want to learn for the sake of learning and a love of learning. So that was Dr. Wagner. Then we brought together 8 of our own parents and community members from a variety of fields and said, okay, what can you tell us about your field now and how it's growing and changing over time? Key takeaways, the importance of communication skills, reading, writing, problem solving, analytical skills, and grit. Graduates must be motivated to continue learning because their job is going to continue to change. Students must learn to fail early and make progress through an iterative process. Again, failure, get up, try it again until you make it right. That entry-level jobs are now done by computers, so what we experienced as our entry-level positions no longer exist, so our students are going to be starting at a much higher level right off the bat, and they have to be ready to adapt. Other themes, the world is interdisciplinary. Graduates must face challenges and see things through multiple lenses, so again, breaking down those barriers between subject matters. The importance that they found in field experience, mentoring, internships, externships, service learning, and project-based learning. So again, really thinking about the opportunities we already provide kids throughout the system, especially at the high school, like the senior project, and expanding on those. And then above all else, it must instill a love of learning, because you have to learn throughout your entire life, as we know. The College in the 21st Century panel was a mixture of parents in our communities who serve both as teachers in college classrooms as well as on admissions, boards, as well as folks who are our liaisons at certain colleges and universities as we, prepare our high school students to move on. We have local, distant, big, small, urban, suburban schools represented. Some of the key takeaways from this event were the need for students to be resilient, to face challenges, learn to struggle, and rebound from failure. And they said far too many undergraduates do not have appropriate coping strategies to deal with failure. Students should have a balance of experiences in school. Yes, they need to be able to take tests, especially if they're going to go on to things like medicine, but they also need to be able to solve problems and have lots of exposure to project-based learning. Applicants to college have to distinguish themselves above standardized test scores, so our giving them opportunities for independent project service learning and capstone projects are key. Colleges are starting to transition away from grades and standardized test scores into more portfolios and narrative applications. There's a small cohort of schools doing that right now. I think there's about 135, mostly private, now public schools doing that, and they're projecting in the next 15 years everybody's going to transition to portfolios and narratives for college applications. And that more and more colleges and universities are developing interdisciplinary departments and programs, and we really should be looking at those and starting to perhaps think about our high school in that way too. We read lots of books and articles because we jigsawed them, so we covered just about everything out there. The world is changing exponentially. We know that. The rate of change is just unbelievable. Significant paradigm shift in education, again, moving the teacher out of the front of the classroom, more to the side to guide the students as they do their own work. Emphasis on skills over content. Yes, content is important, but you can also Google many things, so it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know and what you do with what you find as information online. Lifelong learning, I touched on that. The global community piece, we don't just work in our little bubbles anymore. We need to be able to be culturally responsive and engaged with people all over the world. The importance of wellness and resilience, so kudos to Challenge Success and the fact that we need to continue to build kids who can bounce back and pick themselves up after failure. And then empathy and activism, that we have to learn to appreciate the feelings of others and feel that we need to do not just for the benefit of ourselves, but benefit our community, whether it's close or far. So proposed competencies, there's still some wordsmithing happening, but these are the essential nuggets that you'll see on the eventual portrait: communication, collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving, engaged citizenship, creativity and innovation, and perseverance. So these competencies, once they're kind of critiqued with their definitions and the visual, will be coming out just as school opens in the fall. So what does that mean for next steps? This summer, we'll be finalizing the portrait. Our 4 building principals are going to Finland this summer. As we know, Finland has a phenomenal educational system where there's lots of playtime, downtime, and family time, but the kids still do really well on all tests of critical thinking and happiness. So we're going to go and take some notes there and bring them back. Thanks to a grant from DSEF, we have 13 classroom spaces in the district that are going to be renovated. We're getting rid of the desks and rows, and we're making more collaborative spaces with varied types of seating arrangements. We had the 28 or so educators on the innovation committee initially to create the portrait, but now we're realizing now that we're going to be transitioning this portrait into the classroom, we need more teachers involved in the conversation. So we have opened up to phase 2 of the conversation, and we actually have 49 additional teachers who are coming in August to kind of take the 20 hours that the committee initially did and get the 6-hour version so that they're ready to go and join with us in this work. Next year, we'll continue these conversations with teachers, with parents, about what does this look like for DS, what are we willing to try, what are we not willing to try. We have teachers, as you know, with any change, you want to take those who are interested and give them opportunities. So our early adopters or our pioneers, we have 4 teachers going out to high-tech high school in the fall to learn about project-based learning. We have 4 teachers going to PBL World, Project-Based Learning World, to bring those back. We have 1 educator going to the design school at Stanford to learn about design thinking and bring it back. And the goal is to use our full day of professional development in December to share those practices and get more people interested and involved. There's lots of schools and programs we've identified through our research that are local and far. Wellesley, Needham, and Concord Carlisle all have an interdisciplinary program in their high school. We'd love to send teachers out to see that. There's the New View School in Cambridge, the MIT Innovation Lab, and et cetera, et cetera. There's programs in Minnesota, Wyoming, and California that are amazing. So thanks to a DSEF grant, we're going to be able to send teams of teachers out to places that are not drivable to visit, learn, and bring the information back. And then based on the conversations we have next year and kind of the enthusiasm that has built over time, we'll have an action plan for what happens after that. So that's it. Our website has all this information and all the videos in your spare time. And just a reminder that we really need to rely on the growth mindset. We're great, but in order to continue to be great, we have to continue to grow. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then thanks to Amanda and Nancy and Barb for being on that committee. Lots and lots and lots of hours.
And thank you. I just want to clarify, I wasn't on the committee in Wellesley, but I was part of the process as a teacher. And the experience of being on the committee here was fantastic. Thank you to you for organizing that. I mean, it was a huge undertaking. And I'm amazed at what we were able to accomplish so quickly. Because every day we'd come in and we'd be like, there's no way we're going to get all this done. And sure enough, we did it. That's like it was amazing. It was good.
The Pine Hill teachers recently gave Beth a standing ovation when we presented the summary.
Good.
Very nice.
Yeah, well
Great
deserved.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
So now we'll move to Dawn Pretori to give our
Your monthly report. So I did place in front of you a status of appropriations as of June 10th. So it's hot off the press. And so there hasn't really been that many changes since the last time we met. I'll just highlight for sort of the new members that although it looks like we have a negative variance in salaries, a large portion of that is offset by the positive variance you see under sped services and supplies of $32,000. It's just the way that the services that were provided were charged through payroll versus through a contracted service. So that sort of offsets that. So we sort of were in line with where we thought we would be. It's just how it showed up on our financial statements. But it just in summary, we do anticipate returning. So if you go to the very bottom, right now we have like a positive variance of $34,000 that will go back to the town. That could change a little bit, but that's what we're projecting right now. So that is a good thing for us. Any questions on the status of appropriations? And I'll offer to both of you, if you want to come in at your leisure and just do a quick one-on-one on the budget, I can walk through and just give you a little more familiarity with the line items and sort of how the whole process works. It's also helpful maybe if you go back and look at the packets over the last year and just read the monthly reports and get a flavor of sort of how this all comes together. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Just to give you do you have something on
I was
that?
just saying, you can tell them the terminology, like
The terminology,
circuit breaker,
exactly.
circuit breakers, some
Yeah.
things you don't.
In about 2 years, you'll understand it all. Just an update on your capital. You had 2 projects actually approved. If you went to the ballot box, you saw that Pine Hill was listed, and it did pass. They were both flooring projects, and these are both have been scheduled. The kindergarten wing is actually starting in mid-July, and the library thereafter, but both will be done by early August. And Peter Gimlet is hard at work starting already painting the kindergarten area, freshly little change in color, and we'll be moving all the furniture out and preparing that. Then also the library obviously is a huge undertaking, and we have ordered some special storage carts for the library to facilitate that move. In addition to that, I mentioned that there are some shelves that where I think if we moved them might not be able to be reassembled back. So we did have Lori Ryan assess what it would take to sort of complete the library to the new moving shelves that you have been purchasing. So with her creative ability, we were able to hopefully, I think we have a few more we need to purchase, but refurbish the whole library. And we used your non-resident tuition funds because it is a instructional asset. That was a way that we could order those last month, so that they hopefully will be in when the library is put back together, and we'll be able to get rid of the older shelves that actually probably aren't even, see, they're a little ridgy. So that's really exciting, and hopefully Lori will be excited when that's all put together. That updates capital, and with regards to the enrollment, I think we've covered it.
I think we're good.
Just so what you could do is what I did on my sheet is just, if you see the max per guidelines, you have 69, 69, 69, 92, right? Because there's 4 in 3rd grade, and then it's 75, 75 in 4th and 5th. So I just sort of did that to sort of look. But we are right in line with our 3-year projections, and the budget was built based on our projections. So right now we're hoping everything sort of stays where it is. And remember, our projections actually are a historic model that takes into account both in-migration and out-migration over a long period of time. So that's what builds our formulas. And it has, since we started using those formulas, they have proven to be fairly accurate. So we have built a budget based on those projections, and that's hopefully will all play out. But as we've discussed tonight, we will do what we need to provide the best scenario in education for the Pine Hill students.
All right, so moving on, we have in your packet, which was a large portion of your packet, is the updated Pine Hill School Handbook, and we need to approve that.
Is this a second read for you guys?
This is a second read. We did the first read the last time, and I know that Skill and Rude really worked hard, and it looks wonderful, by the way. It's very clean and very nice, and everything's laid out, and I read through it. Didn't print it. So, does anybody have any comments or anything?
I had one question about it. I agree, it looks fantastic. Thank you for all of your work on it. On page 49, we have the user contract for the digital citizenship and internet acceptability use policy. But I was wondering if that is I couldn't find it in here. And I wonder if we're including a contract for it, if we want to include the policy as part of the handbook too.
I think it's linked in the actual version.
It's linked in the electronic.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
Yeah, all the, it's hard to see on the printout too, but everything that is a URL in the whole document, you can click on anything and it goes directly to the.
Great. Okay, awesome.
So that'll be posted.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now we just have to make a motion to adopt the, what are we calling this? The 2000
Family 1920 Family Handbook.
2019-2020 Pine Hill Family Handbook. Do I hear a motion? So, Mike, and do I hear a second? All in favor? Very good. Okay, so next, we also have to approve, the school improvement plan. So that was the other large part of our packet. So did anyone have any questions or comments with regards to the school improvement plan?
Hopefully, I mentioned at the committee meeting before with the Dover folks, and we've said this with the regional folks, the school improvement plan should really be closely linked to the strategic plan, which is the basis on which our administrators write their goals, our teachers write their goals. So this is actually a really positive thing because it's keeping us focused on kind of the prize, which is the goals outlined in the strategic plan, which I'll talk about tomorrow night a little bit, just for a recap of where we are. But I'm really happy that Barbara and her council have honed in on these. I just wanted to add that.
So anyone else? I like how you stated out all the benchmarks and where we are at this point. So I did appreciate that because sometimes we see what the action plan is and we see it, but we don't really verbalize it enough. So I appreciate that you spelled it out for me. So do we need to make a motion to adopt the 2019-2020 school improvement plan as listed? Do I hear a motion for that?
So moved.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? All right. And so finally, the last part that we have is the consent agenda for the Sherborn School Committee. We have to move to accept that too, right?
Yes, the consent agenda includes the Sherborn School Committee May 14th minutes and then the DSEF 2019
right. The grants.
20 grants.
So do we do those separately or together?
No, together.
Together.
Yep.
So I would like to hear a motion to approve the consent agenda from May 14th, 2019, the minutes for the Sherborn School Committee, as well as the DSEF 2019-2020 grants, which,
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just take this opportunity to thank the DSEF.
Yes.
The amount of money they raise each year and donate to our school and to our kids. Ms. McCoy mentioned the trip to Finland, our teachers being able to travel and visit other amazing schools, the innovative classrooms. The list goes on, and I just can't thank them enough. So, as you approve those grants, I just wanted to add that.
So all in favor? Thank you. So, that being the last thing?
Just communications.
Communications.
That they have in their package
Yes,
for review.
everything that you have in there for review. And for the newer members, we used to print these out and get them delivered to your house. We are no longer doing that, just in the honor of resources and time. But if you do want a hard copy for the meeting, we just need to send an email to Cheryl and we can have one delivered. So just make sure that you look back to your packet, because there's the Dover committee meeting, there's those in there about their minutes, so you can kind of see what they're doing across the way. So everything in there you can read. I just kept mine on my computer tonight, but a lot of times I will print it out. I think there was so much mass, I shied away tonight. So anyway.
We also included the subcommittee assignments are coming up, and each year the committee members kind of are assigned to different subcommittee groups. I'll mention tomorrow night at the joint meeting in my report about the Start Times Task Force Phase 2 needing some representation. Amanda's covering most of it, but there may be some other representation or opportunities to get involved in that. And there are a bunch of other subcommittees. There's never a shortage of subcommittees, unfortunately.
And we can get together and meet when you have a chance, and we can go through them. So we'll put in for what you're interested in, sign up for what you love, and then we'll send it off to Cheryl.
I think there's a maximum too. Isn't there a maximum of two per person? Or
I think it depends.
It depends, because we were all on warrants, and that may change.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
Yes.
So but Cheryl will point us in the right direction if we're too heavy in one area and too light in another. So if you have a special area of expertise, let's say you like the buildings maintenance part, because that's what we're trying to improve at Pine Hill, just let us know. So other than that,
just said I did provide, as we talked about, the backgrounds in your packet about your ability to just assign one signer to the warrant, to sign warrants, and also a sample report of what would replace the three signers.
So we'll have to address that in the fall if we change it. Or can we do it?
You should have your committee assignments done like in the next week or so.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but I meant to change to one signer.
Change the warrant.
You just when you do your committee assignments, if you just assign one person and an alternate, that automatically changes the process.
Okay.
And then what I would suggest is we will then just start delivering those warrants directly to town hall, and whoever the one signer is will just go to town hall and sign.
And that's what they do in Dover.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
It's a safer option, because these are originals that are floating between three people, and you just never know.
Yeah.
So this is a much better option.
Yeah.
And just finally, we also included in your packet the matriculation report.
Right.
It's interesting to all of our school committee members to see where our kids are going to school, and it's just fascinating.
Yeah,
we had a great graduation last week. It was really
I liked your speech.
Oh, thanks. It was a beautiful night, and just so happy for the kids. So.
Me too. I actually have a graduate.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I've heard it.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes.
That's great. Well, so at that, can we move to adjourn? Somebody? So moved.
So moved.
All right. Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor? We're out.
Thank you.
Thank you.